Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to call this meeting of the Regional Family Youth and Health Task Force to order. So, do you have the ability to do a roll call? City Clerk, the roll call, please.
Mayor Mike Nagar,
I am here.
Mayor Pro Tem Marianne Edwards.
She texted me and said she's on her way.
Okay. Mayor Gibbs,
I'm here.
Alan Long, council member. Here. Mary Creighton, Canyon Lake. Tim Brown, Canyon Lake.
Here.
Natasha Johnson, Lake Elsinore. Here. Steve Manos, Lake Elsinore. Tom Thomas, Lake Elsinore Unified School District. Jerry Bowman, Menifee School District. Here. Chris Tomasian, Board, Murrieta Unified. Here. Julio Rodriguez.
Julio had a death in the family, asked me to communicate that. Yeah.
Rita Rogers.
A similar city of Paris, she had something come up with family.
Okay. Bill Holstrom. Here. Mark Bartel. Crystal Rios. Okay. John Norman. Michael Vargas.
Here.
Ben Benoit.
Here.
And Bridget Moore.
Okay, was there anybody who's present that your name wasn't called? Welcome. It's okay, we just got started. So, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Natasha, how about leading us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, while it's not on the agenda, I'm going to go ahead and add it. I need an approval of the minutes that are at your places.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Long, seconded by Mr. Nagar. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are up to item number D1. So welcome to the second meeting of the task force. And I'm ready to get started. Mr. Nagar, any comments?
Not at all. Glad everybody's here. We're right in the middle of summer, so it's understandable that some people couldn't make it. But I'm excited to hear what our speakers got to say.
Okay. Melissa Donaldson, you are our expert. Been running SAFE for how many years?
It'll be 12.
It'll be 12. 12 years and a labor of love. Melissa, you have the mic.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much. This is nice. I've never had a chair to sit and present in before, so that's kind of nice. But this is, I do want to give a little warning that some of the information is obviously going to be hard to hear. And I do have a 911 tape that I'll be playing that's an actual call. So it's one of, you know, we can talk about these things, and this subject is obviously very challenging for all of us to hear, to work in, and for the families to experience. And I felt that that was really one way that I think it brings it home very clearly, more than what I can say. So I just want to warn you that we do have a tape. And it's hard to hear, but it certainly characterizes what we're up against. Now, I want to do a real brief overview. What I'd like everybody to leave with today is really about what the problem is, what significant ramifications it has for our kids, and I think for you all, for being school board members and trustees and city council people and people in positions of making decisions, it's important for you to understand not only what the problem is, but what we can do about that. But really also a big part of what this is, I want you to understand how it affects children. And many people feel domestic violence is really none of their business, and that it is something that families have to deal with. But from a public safety standpoint, I'm pretty sure we all know that's not true. It affects all of us. It affects every system that our kids are affected with, our law enforcement, schools, all of the systems involved. So it's very important that everyone understand what that is. On your screen, you're going to see that it's a real clear, basic Description: domestic violence is a problem that affects every community, all races, social, economic backgrounds, cultures, religions, and relationship types. That means everybody. Domestic violence is a learned behavior. It is a deliberate pattern of abusive tactics by a partner in an intimate relationship to obtain and maintain power and control over the other person. Lots of people think all sorts of different things about it. It's about power and control. Why we're here today is because of this paragraph from the American Psychological Association. A child's exposure to the father abusing the mother is the strongest risk factor for transmitting violence from one generation to the next. Because abuse and violence goes from generation to generation to generation. That's why I'm sitting here, and in 10 years somebody else will be sitting here and will be talking about it, because until we intervene at that lowest level, which is when the kids are young, and change that, the cycle will be perpetrated on.
September 21st, 1991, time 22:13 hours. This will be a 911 call, position CT07.
Standing emergency. What's standing emergency?
My mommy and daddy are having a fight.
Is she hitting her?
What? I'm talking to the police, Mommy. Stop it! Mommy! Stop it! Don't take the baby! Don't think you're gonna hurt the baby! Stop it! Could you just send the police, please?
Okay, we're gonna be there. We're taking your baby.
Stop it! No! Oh. Shut up!
Let me talk to you. Where's your mom?
What?
What's going on?
They're having a fight because this has been going on forever and ever. They always have this because he has a cousin. He's always drinking beer and getting drunk. And Mom.
What's his name? What is his name? Your father's name?
Pierre.
Pierre?
Yeah.
What's his last name?
I don't know, but I think
Is he white, black, or Hispanic?
he's black.
He's your father?
He's my stepfather.
Okay, how old is he?
I don't know.
Does he have any weapons?
No. But he's hurting Mommy.
How's he hurting her?
He made his mommy.
Okay, don't cry. We're gonna send the police.
Okay.
Okay, now where's your mother at right now?
She's in the room fighting with
Does you have a little baby sister?
No, I got baby brother.
Is he trying to take your baby brother?
Baby.
And he's trying to take your baby?
Yeah, because Mama's not drunk. He thinks he's drunk because he can't say nothing because he's drunk. My stepdaddy's drunk.
Are they in a room fighting? Where are they at now?
They're in the room still.
They're in the bedroom?
Yeah, I don't want him to do nothing strange with the baby because if they drop, he's a newborn baby. He's very delicate.
What do you mean do anything strange? What do you think he's going to do to your baby?
I think he's going to take the baby and do something because he's drunk. He might not see the baby and go off without the baby if he takes it.
How old are you?
I'm 6 and my little sister's 4.
You're 6-year-old? You're 6?
Yeah, and I'm in first grade. My sister's in kindergarten.
Okay, what is your name? What is your name?
Lisa. My sister's name is Drea. Excuse me.
You only... Okay.
Hmm? Okay, could you just send the police?
Yeah, they're on their way, but I'm going to keep you on the line until they get there, okay? Is your front door open?
Oh, no.
Can you go and lock it and come back to the phone so the officers can get in?
Just wait, please.
Okay.
He just knocked my sister out.
What sister that he knocked out?
My little sister.
Your
The 4-year-old.
What do you mean he knocked her off?
He put your dad on the floor. And he cried.
I think that kind of gets the point across and why we think it's incredibly important that we do the services that we provide. And let me explain. Lisa, the young lady that made that phone call, was 6 years old when she made that call, and that was one of 100 calls to the police that she made. She's now 29. She was in an abusive relationship herself. Her older brother's in jail. Her little sister has a chronic juvenile justice problem. And they had over 23 documented visits by Child Protective Services to their home, and the children were never removed. Because she now has repeated the cycle of what she's learned and what she's lived in, she is now, according to reports, she's out of that relationship, and she now has 2 of her own children. Our goal today is for you to hear that, to understand how serious the situation is, and why, as schools and cities and nonprofits and churches and all these groups, how much we need to work together to stop this. Each year, 30.3 million children are exposed to violence against their mothers or female caretakers by family members. Now, in all the statistics I'm going to give you in our conversation, I'm going to say she is the victim. And that's not my opinion. That is backed up by statistics from law enforcement. And yes, there are definitely male victims of domestic violence. They are fewer and farther between, but yes, they are, and they are underreported, as all domestic violence is. But for the sake of ease and because statistics back that up, we will be saying she. Studies show that child abuse occurs in 30 to 60% of family violence cases that involve families with children. And the reason that's significant is because many women that we work with, and I know there's people in the audience from the Family Justice Center that work with these families, they don't seem to understand that kids hear this or know that. We will hear over and over again, yes, this is what happened to me, but she was in the bedroom, the kids were under the bed, they were over here, they don't know. They almost always know. 50% of men who assault their wives also abuse their children. Again, why domestic violence is everybody's business and why we must attend to this issue. A #1 predictor of child abuse is woman abuse. This one to me is very significant. A child's exposure, which I already showed you, to the father abusing their mother is the strongest risk factor for transmitting violent behavior from one generation to the next. We all learn how to behave with each other from home, whether it's good or bad. I mean, how many times have you all said, something will come out of my mouth like, oh my gosh, I sound like my mom. And I don't mean it in a good way. Well, this is very similar to that we do what we know. And until someone shows us something different, until someone gives you a different way to behave, you're going to behave that way, even if you know it's not the best thing to be doing. Male children who witness abuse by mothers by fathers are more likely to become men who batter in adulthood than those that do not. That kind of sounds like common sense. And it doesn't mean every child that's raised in homes with abuse will grow up to be either victims or perpetrators, but there's a high likelihood. We see a lot of teenage boys come in, and moms have referred because he is now at 16 doing what dad did, who she left. He's pulling the phone off the wall. It starts with a push when she says, no, you can't go to the party. No, you can't do this. That behavior starts coming up when they're teenagers, and sometimes as young as 11 and 12. Older children are frequently assaulted when they intervene or defend to protect their moms. Many cases, again, will have an altercation going on between mom and dad, and a lot of the young men in the home will jump in there and try and protect mom, and in the meantime will get hurt. Or what happens is there'll be an incident, and then there will end up being a problem between dad and the son, and there'll be a fight there. That's very common. Unfortunately, with abuse and violence, we have so much information on this. There are studies after studies. If you Google domestic violence, child abuse, you will see reams of studies to read. Because #1, we have so many people to study, which is the sad situation. There's been a lot of longitudinal studies as well. We know Lisa's a good example. They show her at 6, and we know where she's at now at 29, and the outcome wasn't good. The researchers have pretty much all come to the same conclusion. Brutality and cruelty to children can leave a clear mark on the chemistry of their brain. Changes in brain chemistry may be the route in which a brutalized child becomes a violent adult. This is not new information either, but it's really critical. And the reason why I tell you it's critical is because so many times people think kids are just acting out. They should just knock it off, even though it's a behavioral issue. But as you're going to hear, it's not just a symptom of being in those homes. There are changes to their brain chemistry, and you're going to understand why, that dictate some of their behavior, which affects schools, which affects everywhere that these kids go, which affects our community at large. So how does domestic violence affect kids? It affects kids in a multitude of different ways, and I need to let you know also that kids at different ages get affected differently with different personalities. This is not every kid is going to have these, but like I said, our subject pool, unfortunately, is huge. So we've had a pretty good witness to all the things that kids go through. And kids who witness domestic violence show more anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, anger, and different temperament problems than children that do not. That kind of makes sense. If your life is crazy and you're seeing chaos in your home at all times, there's violence going on, obviously that's not going to make you a very happy person in your day-to-day. 80 to 90% of kids in domestic violence homes are aware of the violence, as I told you. And that turns itself into all sorts of different behaviors that teachers have to deal with at school, that after-school programs do, and that we in society do. And it doesn't just stay at home. These kids are all over in our communities and need some assistance. There's emotional side effects to abuse and violence. A lot of these kids are embarrassed, and it depends on the age, as I said. So it's kind of a family secret. So if you're wondering why the kids don't talk to teachers and tell trusted adults, because they're embarrassed, they're scared. They love their parents as much as what's happening is uncomfortable and horrifying to them. It's still their family. So we have a hard time getting kids to talk about it. They also have become depressed, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, just like their parents do, just like the victim of the domestic violence does. They act out or they withdraw. And I think those of you that have been in the educational system and those of us who work with kids, you'll see those kids that sit in the back and don't care. They're not interested. They just aren't, they're just not going to engage. Because why? They really have a very feeling of hopelessness. Or the opposite of that. They're going to be the one in the classroom acting out constantly. Everywhere they go, they're going to be acting out their anxiety and their aggression. A lot of these kids we see that is very, it's a sad situation, but we'll have kids come in that have a lot of siblings, and mom is just so depressed and so beat down that now the 8-year-old is now parenting the family. Not only is she taking care of her siblings, she's also taking care of mom. So this kid never has a chance to be a kid, and obviously isn't developmentally in a place to be able to do that. But we see kids do that frequently. Excessive attention seeking, which I think, again, people can continue to look at that as though they just want attention. They've got issues going on that need to be addressed. Out of control, at-risk behaviors, we see all those, everybody sees those kids. Bedwetting, nightmares. Reduced intellectual competency, and I'll get into why. We're going to see that, which affects, obviously, the educational system and their learning ability. And when you don't do well at school, you're miserable at home, you're not doing well at school, what is there? You're really not doing well anywhere. Mood swings. A lot of these kids are really clingy, dependent, very manipulative in how they get through the day. Defensive, they lie so people just don't get all up in the business of what's happening at home. And these types of behavior affect everywhere across the board. Our schools, law enforcement, who's going to respond to the at-risk kid doing things out in the community, stealing from the malls, hanging out, drugs, every at-risk behavior you can think of that impacts all our systems. Now, socially, these kids and families in general, sometimes they're very isolated from friends. They're not engaged anywhere, and they're going to come home and do nothing. And these kids don't trust anybody. They haven't had adults in their life really to tell them that we're trustworthy. So when you have a hard time engaging them in school and in activities, engagement with these kids is key. And the thing that makes kids become engaged is relationships. You can have the best programs in the world, but if you don't have the great people teaching it or working with the kids and engaging, teenagers are hard to engage anyway. They're in a whole different, they're developmentally in a whole different place, and they're hard to connect to anyway. So if you put on top of that they're experiencing abuse or violence at home, it's really a challenge. A lot of these kids are very nervous. We call that hypervigilant. If you're hearing about or nervous about something happening in your home all the time, I mean, think about going to work. You go to work and you have a very explosive boss. I don't know if any of my employees in the office, but I know that's not their situation. But if you come to work every day and you don't know what's going to happen, You don't know, maybe today if you spill milk, you're going to get hit. Or if mom doesn't put dinner on the table today, she's going to get screamed at, and later there's going to be a fight. But tomorrow it's okay. So there's no consistency, there's never the feeling of security, so kids are always on edge. Those are the kids that get in line at the lunch line at school. Kids are bumped up tight. Somebody bumps into somebody, they turn around, they pop the kid behind them, and then there's a fight, and they get in trouble, and they get expelled. Then they get expelled, and they go home to stay in that environment for a week because they got in trouble at school, when it all comes back to the same thing. A lot of these kids kids will call them the drama queens in our groups, because there's always something going on. They are never happy. They're always stirring the pot somehow. Relationships are really challenging for these kids because they haven't learned how to have a healthy relationship. Now, physically, the nurses in the school see these kids in their offices all the time. When we have a lot of the kids that get referred to us, first thing they'll tell us is she's been in the office every day with a stomach ache. She comes in with headaches. She's coming in late. She needs to take a shower. There's a lot of hygiene issues with these kids. And we all see these kids. There's also more serious things like high-risk play, self-abuse, which we've seen with the cutting and different things that happen with some of these kids. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm not a doctor. My initials are MD, but I'm definitely not a doctor. But I want to explain to you a little bit about what's happening in the brain so you can understand that it's not something that these kids can control, and we've got to do something different than just expect them to behave, because it doesn't work. And when we do that when they're in school, we expect them to behave, they get dealt with, but then what happens is it never goes away. So what happens? They go into the juvenile justice system, they graduate from that, and they're in our adult prisons. So there's been several studies as of in the past 10 years about looking at children's brains, and I tried to make this simple so I could explain it and we all could understand it, compared to soldiers been in combat. There's quite a large study on this. And what they did was they put up overhead, and let me back up. One of the things about these kids that you'll notice too, why they have trouble, they don't read social cues very well. I think a lot of us probably know adults that don't read social cues very well, right? So these kids don't, because you're going to find out they don't register what an angry face looks like the same that you and I do. So they put up pictures of different types of faces with different emotions, happy, sad, angry, whatever. The kids, when they did that, a lot of these kids afterwards too, they had brain scans. They had, if you read up there, the study showed activity in 2 regions of the brain that are involved in detecting threats. The brains of soldiers who were exposed to violent combat did the same thing, and their brains looked very, very similar. So that tells you that these children are feeling like they're at war at home. Constant threat and scared, and that's not healthy for you. So they're hyper aware of their environment, what I said earlier. They're going to react very quickly. They're going to jump at things that most people wouldn't jump at, because they're hyper vigilant. Because when you're at home and somebody's getting hurt, you're always watching. You always know. Did you hear on the tape where, I don't know, I cut it off because it got a bit worse, where during part of that tape, Lisa says, "Wait a minute, I have to go see what's happening." And she puts the phone down to go in the other room because she heard her mom scream. They always know where everybody is and what's going on, because that's survival. That does keep them. That is a survival mechanism, but it also will affect the kids' brains, which sets the stage for some of the other things we're going to talk about. And I'm just going to gloss over this because we certainly aren't in a medical class. But negative impact on the developing brain structures also associated with changes in brain chemistry. When you have overwhelming stress early in your life, it alters the production of stress-regulating hormones that circulates through your brain, through your body. One of the regulators is cortisol. It's hormone cortisol, and key neurotransmitters such as epinephrine, which is adrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin, which is the happy feel-good. And remember Dr. Doan talked about that a little bit, about the gaming. When the kids would get excited, their dopamine starts flushing, it gives them a rush, and that's what drugs do. Same thing's happening, but what happens is these kids, those hormones are going all the time because they're stressed. Adrenaline is supposed to pop you up. Cortisol is supposed to give you that energy because something's happening. Fight or flight, we all know that. Something dangerous is happening, you're going to run or you're going to turn around and fight somebody. Well, what happens with these kids, that's happening all the time. So if you talk about a fight or flight, you're walking to the mall and you hear steps behind you, you get all nervous, and then you get in your car and realize it was nothing. And you take a breath and you relax and your body goes to normal and you go on with your day. These kids live in that heightened state of anxiety all the time. So what happens is their bodies never get the chance to relax and calm down, and it affects them, their mood and their behavior, as you can imagine. Think of the most anxious moment you've ever had and feeling like that all the time, or a significant amount of time. I have this on email, and I can certainly email it to you because I don't want to go through all this. But it's about what I just talked about. While it's important for these kids to have this ability, for all of us to have all these hormones in our body because it takes care of us, it ends up being a very negative response to have it going through your body at all times and long term. And you know, it's interesting. If you look at the bottom of the slide, it talks about higher and more prolonged levels of cortisol in the bloodstream has negative effects. Impaired cognitive performance. What does that mean? They're not going to do as well at school. They're not going to do as well in after-school programs or even following basic commands with folks. They have physical issues, suppressed thyroid, blood sugar imbalances, decreased bone density, your immune system goes down. So what happens? These kids are sick a lot. Aren't they? They have runny noses, they have the flu a lot, they're just sick. They don't feel good, they don't look good. They have higher blood pressures. And the thing that's interesting about this is some of the same symptomology that shows on law enforcement that are working in really high stress, not Temecula, Marietta, because we are the safest cities, but a lot of cities that have a lot of police response and a lot of action constantly. This is what happens to law enforcement and other people in those types of jobs. Now, there's parts of your brain that this affects, and the reason I'm telling you this is because these kids are all growing up and developing. We have brain development at different ages in child development and adolescence, and when you have these types of activities on top of just them trying to learn the ABCs and move up, that when they're really having these physical problems, it makes learning very challenging. So what happens is they start falling behind and they start becoming problems. And then the system, how do we deal with that? Because if you're in school and you're just not performing, you're just not performing. And who's going to find out what that is? And what happens is these kids just kind of float through, or they fall out, or they just don't do well and cause problems for all of us in the community. Some of the key structures that that kids have problems with when there's abuse and violence in the home is your cortex, which helps associate with rational thinking. So what's that tell you? They're not going to make good decisions. Your hippocampus helps you process memories and emotions. So what? They're going to be highly charged. I'm going to be sad, or I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to be angry, and I'm going to be emotional. It's pretty up and down, up and down. And both of these regions are critical for learning. Now, there's I don't know if any of you heard of Dr. Perry, but he is a child psychiatrist and just written tons of books, and he was actually in Temecula or Marietta probably about 15 years ago. He's one of the best speakers ever, and he's done a lot of work with children and trauma. And he's done a lot of work on children with trauma in their brains. And I put him in here because I wanted you to have him for a resource to look him up if you want to read him his books as well. But he talks about repeated abuse causes the amygdala to signal danger when there is no apparent threat. Again, a problem. The kids read threat into everything because their brains are starting to be wired that way. A maladaptive amygdala makes an abused child recoil in fear at the drop of a hat. Again, not good for these kids being in school and out in the community. I love this top line. We did this, and I know Elizabeth is here in the back somewhere. At the Family Justice Center a few years ago, we did a campaign across Riverside County. We had big, not bulletin boards, what do you call those? Thank you, billboards. And we had 3 different versions. We had one of them that was around kids, because working with family violence is such a challenge. And when moms find out that their kids do see it, hear it, and know about it, that's one of the best ways to get her to move on out of that violent relationship. But they do know. And until we get that through and start dealing with those kids when they're at a younger age, we're going to continue to see these cycles. We're going to still see these kids at school having problems and fighting and not doing well, and growing up to be adults that don't do well. I thought this was an interesting quote from a prosecutor. As you know, we have a lot of really good prosecutors in Riverside County who prosecute domestic violence cases. And one of the quotes was this: "As prosecutors, we have long noted with distress how often children are present when violent crimes are committed. Kids don't need to be the target of the violence to be scarred by it. Ask any adult who witnessed domestic violence while growing up. Decades later, he or she will be able to talk to you vividly of the events and how it affects them today." I know that for a fact because I have people tell me to this day they can remember back when they were very, very young of exactly how things unfolded. Now, I did a paper which, as I was thinking about and combing through slides, trying to figure out what that I should share with you, I did a paper on a family. I've been doing this for a long time. This was probably about 15 years ago. And it was a family that was chronically in the system. So I was getting ready to speak to some elected officials in San Diego there was some money attached to it, and they were going to make some decisions about where they were going to allocate some very large pockets of funding. So I took a family and I broke it down into dollars. And I did it not because as elected officials you only care what dollars is, but I really wanted folks to see that we keep spending all this money on the back end when so much it would be not even close to a third of the amount of money on the front end to prevent all these problems. It's great financially for cities and governments and schools and everybody else, but it's also obviously for the human toll. This family had 4 kids in it, and there was a significant amount of family violence for a few years. She finally got out, but the kids were taken for a short period of time, and I chronicled the kids and where they went in the system. And then I got DPSS to work with me on how much money that was going to be. And it was staggering. And I never quoted the amount because I couldn't guarantee that's exactly the amount that it was. But each kid, I mean, think about it, if the kids are taken away, there were 4 of them. They all went to a different foster care home. And it was for some of them longer, some of them shorter, because some were older, and the system deems older kids as being able to take care of themselves a little better, so they plunked them home earlier. They went home and had the same situation. Little ones stayed out longer, but eventually came back. Then they got in trouble at school, so then you have a school counselor involved. Then you have your school resource officers involved. Then it escalated from there to the juvenile justice system and juvenile hall. It just kept getting bigger and bigger. School counselors, nonprofits, everybody. The amount of money and time that was spent on this family, and the outcomes were not good by the time I left, had you just, and I say you, I mean all of us, done something up front when those kids were going to kindergarten. We all knew something was wrong. Didn't do anything. And for lots of reasons, not because people don't care, because they do, but because our systems aren't set up to really intervene the way that they should. That not only were those kids' lives probably not doing well, we spent thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on one family. One. Somehow that doesn't make sense. What does this mean for us as elected officials, as school board people, as nonprofits, as community members? It means that we understand the physical, chemical, emotional trauma that young victims experience, so it's critical to us putting together programs and interventions so that we can mitigate all that. It also helps us understand working with adults from these families. Because one of the things a lot of people have asked me over the years, like, how do you do that? How do you work with these parents because they just don't care? And I don't believe that to be true. I think most parents care. But parents are scared, they're angry, they don't know what to do, and so sometimes that doesn't come off like they care, but I can almost guarantee you most of them do. Because they are those kids that didn't get the help. I'm not saying it's easy to do it, and I'm not saying they're not combative and we have issues to do that, but they never got the assistance that we're trying to help them with their kids on. Now, those brain chemistry changes mean our youth are at very high risk of drug and alcohol use, mental health problems, involvement in our legal system, and high risk of becoming perpetrators and victims without intervention strategies. And that affects all of us. That's a public safety issue. That's not just an issue for the schools and the kid graduates and that's not the problem anymore. Or it's not a problem for me, they're done, they're 18, they're out of our PAL program. Research estimates that fewer than 10% of all these kids are getting the help they need. Now, when I say help, I mean the help that they need. There's tons of programs out there. We're talking about interventions that make sense, not putting 50 kids in a room and taking them through different courses to show them the error of their ways. I'm talking about programs that make an impact because there's a relationship. And some of you in this room have probably heard this story before, but I always tell the story of when we run a PAL program. It's law enforcement, volunteering, and we match them up with our kids and we do fun stuff with them. And because the goal is for them to see law enforcement in a good way, because most of these kids have had poor experiences. They've come to their house and arrested their dad, or they've been arrested themselves, or they just don't like them for whatever reason. And the whole goal is to get them to respect law enforcement, right? Because it makes sense. But if they're not going to respect an officer with a gun, they're certainly not going to respect me or you as a teacher or anybody else. Our goal is to start instilling that. And we do that by doing activities together. But until we can make a connection with somebody, and Detective Frost always tells a story. She was out on patrol, and she was a PAL officer with us, and ran into one of the kids out in the street, and there was some mischievous ensuing, and I believe there was a fight brewing. And she rolls up and she talks, and the kids look up, and one of them happens to be our kid, looks at her and says, "Officer Frost." She goes, "What are you doing over here?" And he's like, "I'm so sorry," and leaves. And that kid ended up doing very well. And it's because he knew her name, he knew she was invested in his welfare and his outcomes, and there was a relationship there. And until programs can build examples and activities where the kids are connecting with somebody, they're just going to sit in the room just like they do at school. They're going to not be engaged. So it's critical that the programs that are developed are, and that's why good teachers are critical. And I think that's why these poor teachers that are having to deal with kids that are just ill-equipped to sit in that classroom and learn. I ran a preschool many, many years ago through the state of California, and it was an at-risk preschool. And looking back now, it was genius, and I wish we had more of those. And all the kids that went to that school were 0 to 5, and then we had a pre-K classroom, but I mean infants. And that school was for Child Protective Services referred families. They were young families, and they were already ID'd by Child Protective Services as being at risk. That meant these kids are going to go in the system if we don't have some intervention. So the families were referred to, and they went to child care 5 days a week, from 9 to 5. And it didn't matter if parents worked or not, because we knew that environment was better than being home right now. And during the time that the kids were in school, mom or dad or both had to volunteer at the school. And if you think about it, that's a nightmare. You're going to have 30 abusive or potentially abusive parents working in a child care center. Obviously, we had to figure out how we were going to do that, and they had to go through parenting with us, one-on-one parenting. Not in a classroom where you're sitting in the back filling out your papers and go home. It was one-on-one. And then they had to do lab, which meant they had to work with kids with an earpiece in their ear, being told what to say when things would happen. That classroom, that school was so successful. And unfortunately, like everything else, during hard times, that funding got cut. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, because we know in kindergarten who these kids are, by the way. If you ask any teacher and pull them aside, they're going to tell you, "Oh, I'm worried about this one." And that's when we should be doing something. We need to aid the teachers in the classrooms and saying, what can we do with those kids at that time? Because when they come to us and they're 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 on up, it's a much harder haul to change that behavior. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much harder. Now the good news. And there is good news. We see a lot of kids do better. We also know that positive experiences can contradict the traumatized children's negative expectations. And it's critical to them and to their brain readjusting. And you can just say it's like teaching a kid to trust again. Their experiences are very negative of this. And when we have good relationships and good programs, and I start doing well at school, and I start having friends that are in the positive light, things start turning around. So the outcomes can be good. But if we don't do anything, the outcomes are incredibly poor. To do that, we all need to work together. And that means all the people that are here, schools, nonprofits, programs that are out there, therapists, all the groups that we all refer to, but it's still very siloed. And because of that, I think what happens is kids get different things in different places, and to mitigate all that and to do good work, we have to do things differently. We really do. One of the examples I can tell you that we do things differently, and it's not with the kid end as much, but with domestic violence, is our family justice centers. And that is the concept of co-located services, so that when someone comes in with a problem of domestic violence, they're going to be seen by all those professionals and paraprofessionals in one site. And it makes sense. It would be great if we could do that for some of these kids when they're young, and for the families to come in a and back in the olden days, we called those family resource centers. That's not a, that term's been changed a little bit over the years, but you would walk in, and if you go to the Family Justice Center and you need a restraining order, you're going to get a restraining, or if you need to see law enforcement, we're going to call them. If you need to see victim witness, they're right up the hall. And as we add more services like child protective services, because we want to mitigate what's happening right there. If we have to rely on her in a horrible situation, she just left with her 2 kids in her car and she has nothing else, do you really think she's going to call 15 different places to get what she needs? She needs gas for her car, her kids are hungry, and she needs diapers. Really, do you think we're going to get her to go to parenting classes? Common sense tells you no. She can't. So if you go into one place, we're going to feed your kids, we're going to get you a restraining order, we're going to take a police report, we're going to give you a gas card so you can get back here tomorrow, we're going to set you up with a hotel if you need it, if you need childcare. All of a sudden, stress, remember the whole thing about stress? Her stress level lowers. She can start thinking more clearly about doing something good for her kids and for herself and get out of that situation. But if her anxiety level stays that high, decision making is poor. None of us make good decisions when we're stressed out. I haven't met too many people that have. I know I don't. So that is really, I tried to do across the top, simple, about really the effects of domestic violence. You know, they just came out today with another report that said 1/3 of all women experience violence in their lives. 1/3. If that was a disease and we had medication to fix that, and it was such high, I mean, that's epidemic proportions. Don't you think we would be doing that? And we don't with this, because it's families and it's complicated, and who are we to tell somebody else how to behave? Well, it's illegal, number one, so we can tell you not to do that because we have law enforcement on our side. But how do you mitigate that after that piece? And that's the challenge. But we know there's great programs out there, and there's people in this room today that do great programs for these kids. And this is why, because it's such an epidemic, and we know it's detrimental to all of us for these kids to be out and about with no services.
Thank you, Melissa. That was a phenomenal presentation. And it's awful hard to listen to that 911 call and not feel engaged and emotional about it. Okay, so we're going to open this up for questions to you. So I'm going to start on my extreme right on the dais. So, and we'll just work our way down.
Hi, I'm Tim Brown, Canyon Lake. Question, some firsthand experience on this topic, but one of the biggest challenges I had was dealing with a mother who was scared of going for help because of fear of losing her children, fear of child protective services coming in. And I think that's a very real roadblock for a lot of women from getting help. Do you have any comments on that?
You know, it is a real issue, but I look at Child Protective Services in a little different light, and we try to share that with folks that come to us. Child Protective Services' job is obviously to evaluate the situation. If the kids are in danger, obviously to do something about that. Most of the time, and I can't say always, but most of the time, if a domestic violence victim is seeking help, they see that as a very positive thing. And sometimes having CPS involved is not a bad thing. Sometimes they can bring resources to the table and work in partnership, and I think that's a huge issue that CPS has been working on and has been working on for a really long time, is to be viewed more as a partner and working to help you with your kids versus the Gestapo just coming to get your kids, because that's not true. They are really invested in those kids staying at home unless there is a threat to their safety. So we just share with the women that we are going to work with you. If we will, if someone made the call, let them know that you're working with us, give them our phone number, and we will help manage that. And they don't always go in and take kids if it's a DV case. They will evaluate the situation, many times leave the kids there and say, you really need to take care of business and get out of the situation, or they very well might. So we're all different. All social workers are different, but they have a pretty, yes, there's horror stories out there, but in the whole scope of it, I've worked with thousands of people, and most of the time they're helpful.
Comment
Can help
in
'em
relation to that is that it still doesn't, the perception, maybe rightly or wrongly, is that if those women go in for help, they're going to lose their children. And for whatever reason, maybe that's true, maybe it's valid, maybe it's not valid,
Right.
but you've got a lot of people who don't seek intervention because of those fears from CPS. So I don't know how CPS can deal with that, but I think they need to, something needs to be done to make it clear to women who are seeking help that their children will not be threatened by that seeking of that help.
It is. It's a challenge. I mean, it really is, because, and what I can tell you too, if they can't, if they're going to call law enforcement, obviously, if an officer responds to a domestic violence call, they may or may not call CPS depending on the situation. They don't always, but they will give them a card. All officers in Riverside County will hand them a card to make a phone call, and when they call us, then they may not have to deal with CPS at all. But, and I will tell you, we're mandated reporters. If we feel that there's an imminent threat to the child, we're going to call. But our first mandate is we're going to help mom get safe. And when moms do that, CPS wants that for them too. It's tough. I don't know how to fix that either.
Mr. Benoit.
Just a comment, actually went to the website and I was impressed with it doesn't go to the back browser and you can click off. So that was the safeguards, that was really good.
Important. There is cyber, we've had, there's programs that go on that many men have put on programs. So if they're women that are living with them, if they go to seek help online, they know exactly where they've been. There's programs for phones where they can, every time her phone rings, his phone, and he can see everything. So from a technology standpoint, it's a scary, scary world right now. So we have to be careful. They have to be careful on their computers. We have computers at the Family Justice Center and at SAFE where they can go and use and do whatever they need to do with us and not do it at home at all, which is what we normally recommend.
Mr. Manos.
Thank you. Melissa, you've got years on us. We got a 30-minute presentation, so I'm sorry. I mean, work in the, yeah, of course. My head's swimming, and so it's hard to even wrap your head around something like this or what to do. So I guess the best question I could ask is, what would be the best outcome from this meeting here tonight? What could we do as a group to go ahead and augment what is already being done, or possibly start some sort of new initiative to go ahead and address these issues?
I think having start the dialogue between all the entities that are serving children in a real meaningful way, to really look at what services and what the task force original vision was each topic that we're hearing every time that we get together is to then walk away from that and look in your own respective cities and school district to see what services do you have. And I don't mean, we have lots of groups that talk and share resources. I'm talking about sit down and really say what can we do and what services can be boots on the ground services and how to do that. And it's tough to do. It's tough to get people to collaborate. And again, I'm going to harp on the Family Justice Center, but what could be harder to get a DAs together, cops together, and social workers, and all of us on the same page and doing, trust me, those are three interesting groups, and we did it. So I've said if we can do it, anybody can do it. But to get together and really have a facilitator to facilitate that conversation, a lot of those cities and collaborations that get together, sometimes I think if you don't have an outside person facilitating that conversation that isn't involved in turf, politics, or isn't invested in any of that, their only investment is making a good system, that's helpful to do that. But I would urge that you go back to your cities and look at what services you have and really analyze what those services are and what are they doing. And obviously, pull those people together and say, we really need to do these types of things, but it takes work and you need someone, you kind of need a cheerleader in your area to champion that.
Melissa, I have two questions actually. My first one is you're referring to the Family Justice Center, and I'm understanding what that is, or Family Resource Center as they used to be called, right?
That was a different type of
Okay.
service. It used to be a family could walk in and get all sorts of stuff.
Okay. Do you know how many of these facilities or amenity, locations we have in Riverside County?
Family Justice Center, we have 3.
Okay.
There's one in Marietta on Technology. There's another one in Riverside, and we just opened one in Indio. When I say we, it's a collaboration. We're housed, and the district attorney has given us space, and then we're all housed in that space and partners and provide our services together at those 3 places.
Okay. So 3 for the whole county.
They serve the county, correct?
Okay. Okay, great. And my second question is, you referenced in your presentation that kindergarten is where we have to intervene. That's really when we know that there's a problem. But from my perspective and not the experience, how do we intervene at a better level? That's, you said it's hard to do based on what we're allowed to do. So what is the solution to
Well,
that
when
problem?
I said kindergarten, I mean kindergarten because that's when we first get eyeballs on them in a setting where teachers and other adults see the kids.
Okay.
A lot of these kids aren't going to preschool. They're not going to daycare.
Sure.
They're with family members or home with mom. So they're pretty isolated. So this is the first glimpse we get a lot of these kids is kindergarten because it's public school. Really the best time to be helped, and there's actually programs throughout the country that identify some of these babies at birth, that they know mom coming in the door is going to need some help. And they have programs in the hospitals to go home with her and help get that going, and even as infants. So if I could pick the best case scenario, we would do those screenings from a medical perspective. Again, nurses, they know. It's not like these are all hidden children. We see them, we know, we just don't know what to do with them and who's going to do it. So I think even from hospitals and preschools know, which is why we had our preschool, but it's just I said kindergarten because that's when we first get our eyes on them. I think having teachers be able to have resources at their fingertips when they're in school and they're having a challenge with a parent, what do they do with that? And who do they call? And for them to be able to have those resources, but there's issues with, how do they do that? How do they get mom to say, you know what, I think Johnny's having a hard time with what? How do we word that? So I think there's got to be a way to help educate the teachers at that grade level to say, how do you talk to these parents? Number one, because I know lawsuits and being scared of what parents are going to do is a real issue.
Sure.
How do we talk to them and then share with them those services? Because many times when you talk to parents, they're not going to take it well. And you don't want her to keep Johnny out of school tomorrow because she's scared you're going to do something. So it's a delicate dance, but I think it can be done. I know it has been, and I just think there needs to be resources attached that these teachers know how to do that, and training for them, just some real basic, how do you broach the subject in a way that's going to be helpful? And even though parents and kids, and I say this all the time, don't act like they're listening, they usually do, and it just might not be the moment that they can hear it, but that doesn't mean because you've raised the flag that they're not going to come back in a week and say, you're right, I'm having trouble at home, my husband's hurting me, I need help. But it's how to do it. It's that entry point that is such a struggle for so many people. And so much pressure is put on the schools, but unfortunately, that's the gatekeeper. That's where the kids are. So it's tough, and we can't expect teachers to be social workers and therapists and psychiatrists and everything else. So to give them the tools and the programs, I think, is key.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Kids that suffer don't want to talk or they can't talk. I'm kind of wondering, what do you do with these kids that can help them open up to you? What are some of the things that are available to that? I'm just kind of curious.
Well, I think for us, a lot of our kids, not a lot, some of our kids that are in that situation, we don't get till they've broken the law. Like we have youth court here, and a lot of those kids will come to us through youth court, and they might just want to sit there. Again, that was my point about having really small interactive groups, because you can't hide. We don't let you sit there and not talk. If you want that little certificate to get out of jail card, you have to participate. But it's all in how you do it. I'll give you a good example. We have, and Dr. Doan, I sent him an email afterwards. We just had a kid come to us that's addicted to video gaming. He's a young kid, latency age, and had been violent with his mom. Doesn't want to go anywhere, doesn't want to do anything. So we said, you're going to learn how to ride a horse. Now, did he ever want to ride a horse? No. Does he want to ride a horse? No. But he did. And he's going to keep doing it. He didn't talk, but that's okay. We want you out and doing things, because we'll slowly get to that. But they need to be able to trust an individual to be able to get past that piece. And that means someone picking them up somewhere. And even if it is a low-level shoplifting or whatever that gets them in the door, that's okay once they're in. But it's getting them to come in that's the issue.
I was kind of thinking about younger children that maybe the language is a slight problem for you. How do you get them to kind of go through that?
Little kids are easier, to be honest with you, because you can engage them in play.
Okay.
And once you engage younger kids in play, you can dictate what kind of play that is, and kind of steer them a little easier. And younger kids are easier, definitely. It's just being able to get that family to come in or do what we're seeing.
My sister's an art therapist, and
Exactly.
she's been doing this for a long time. She just lives in Virginia, so I don't get to talk to her about it. But I know she says sometimes it's difficult. You just give them paper, and they can just start drawing, and you can kind of get a feeling of what's going through their mind.
And kids will talk when they're ready. They just have to be in a venue where that can happen. You can't make them give you that information. But I always joke and say we do bait and switch. This is just going to be a fun activity, because we know as we do those fun activities, like I said, as they go on trips with law enforcement, they hate them when they get in the van and they're their new best friend on the way back, because they forgot they were a policeman. All they know is they caught a fish. And so that kind of changes. And then obviously some of these kids are going to need clinical intervention, which we refer to. So it's a package deal. And that we just do all those things together in hopes of getting those kids to do well.
Thank you.
Question?
Close enough.
Okay.
Hi, Jerry Bowman from Menifee. There. Okay.
Let the leaves apart.
It's been my experience. I taught high school for 30 years. And of course, by the time you get there, kids are very good at hiding things and manipulating and not letting you know what's going on, even to the point of being very good students so that, they're successful someplace. My question, I guess, and it's kind of a convoluted question, is as a teacher and having seen some of this, it's very frustrating because the system itself, I mean, we're talking about identifying kids, but it's also very scary to misinterpret certain things. And as mandated reporters, you're kind of always walking that edge. But when they are reported, CPS may make recommendations. If it's not something that's horrendous and obvious, the goal of family court or whatever is to keep families together.
Right.
So, as you reported, then I guess my question is, what is the chance that appropriate measures are taken in that case, where it may not be something huge? We see it in high school with cutting and various other things by then.
Right.
But that means there's something, no matter which parent it is, that's been going on for a long time. So how long in the system? From my experience, sometimes that can take years and lots of money. So I guess the other part of the question is, what impact does demographics have? If people have the money to fight these things, the kid's caught in the middle. And if it's not something where CPS says we're taking them away, how do we deal with that?
Well, a lot of the kids that I'm talking about and that are really not ever rise to the level of CPS. As kids get older, there's risk factors that the system itself sees these kids as able to care for themselves. Obviously, you have a 16-year-old in a home and a 2-year-old in a home, and there's something going on. I've seen many times the 2-year-old's pulled and the 17 is not. Because he's 17, he can run, he can do whatever. And with the older kids, we're talking about the kids that are just kind of sitting in the back room, back of the room. They don't raise their hands, they don't really participate, but it doesn't really rise to the level of calling CPS. They're just kind of getting through barely, if they are, or they're flunking out. But who's to know what to do. And again, that's kind of what we do. Those are the kids we're looking for. We started a leadership program back, I don't know, about 4 years ago, and we picked all the kids that no one would ever in the wildest imagination consider leaders. But it's amazing when you call them a leader, I don't care what they think or say, and they're looking at you like, I won't say what I know what they're thinking in their head. But we just act like we don't even notice, and you keep plowing through and treating them a certain way, and then all of a sudden the behavior starts rising to the expectation. Just like the expectation is you will be respectful here. I don't care what your problem is. I don't care what you came in the door. We have basic rules. Again, it's about programming and grabbing them. And unfortunately, a lot of those kids only get grabbed because they've done something. Right. But if it's a low-level crime or something very simple, and we've had referrals from therapists and teachers that say, I'm just so worried about him. He hasn't done anything yet. And I really think programs, and I know this is a challenge, on school site by other nonprofits is the key. Because for two things, parents trust schools primarily, okay, I see shrugs, but Murrieta Valley School District, we ran a Girls Circle Boys Council out of those schools, and we did it during the day. And I tell you, this was novel. We did it during the daytime, and it rotated the period that we came, so the kid didn't miss the same period every week. The kids, the thinking was they're already doing poor in school anyway. So who cares if they miss one more period and they're learning something and doing something in a facilitated group, right? And the outcomes of that group, and we did a pre and post test on all these kids, stayed in school, got better grades. These were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders engaged in alcohol, drugs, cutting, and sex. And I know parents, when I did this presentation in school, they were horrified. My 6th grader doesn't know anything about sex. I said, no, your 6th grader is engaging in sex. So until we get parents and teachers to kind of wrap their brains around that, we can't keep our heads in the sand. It is happening. So we had these programs on campus, and all those kids, the majority of those children, did really well. I mean, we were up in the 90 percentile, those kids' grades improving. The questions, a lot of them were, can I turn down alcohol if someone gives it to me? Very graphic questions. And most of the kids, some of them, I know they were fudging a little, and some of them just outright lied. And then on the back end of it, a year later, having gone through all the modules, we're doing tremendously better. The teachers reported better. The counselors, it's not just us in our wisdom thinking that the kids are doing better. We had anecdotal reports of them doing better. We knew law enforcement wasn't going to their homes anymore. I mean, there's some real concrete evidence that these programs are working. And those were 6th and 7th and 8th graders, and that's our target because we're seeing behaviors that used to happen in high school are now happening in middle school and 5th grade. So now we're saying, gosh, we even got to get down there now and do some work with those kids on things we typically think of high schoolers doing. Latency age kids now are not what they used to be. So we got to get in there and give them the tools to not engage in this at-risk behavior. So on-site school programs, I'm telling you, are worth their weight in gold because they're already there. Because remember, a lot of these parents are low income too. If it's mom by herself, single parent, if she's working, she's working. And how is she going to pick that kid up, get him to point A to point B? It's not she doesn't want to. How is she going to do it? So when you do it on school grounds, they're already there. They can either do it during their school day or stay after and then deal with it that way. And it's much more successful. Your attendance rate is way better. I mean, common sense tells you they're already there.
Okay, thanks. You've referenced a number of times that engagement is the key, and mentoring with one particular adult in particular, creating relationships one-on-one. So I'm seeing that in addition to your on-site school programs, that the key is really that one person probably at school that can reach out, help connect with the child through an extended period of time. And to me, I see how role coaching can play in that, coaches. But then you also mentioned teacher training and how do you identify kids early, and then how do you have the programs. What type of resources are out there that schools can get to train teachers to recognize it, and what sorts of resources are out there that can fund these on-site school programs that can mentor these kids so closely like they need to be?
Right.
It seems like it takes tremendous resources, and since we, according to your accounts, haven't met the kids' needs yet, obviously additional resources are needed. Where would that come from?
Well, again, the other $100,000 question, but there are resources out there, and I think part of what we're trying to do with this task force is for you all to go back again to your respective cities and start asking about, look at all the nonprofits you have in your city, what are they actually doing, what kind of programs do they have operational, and I think the next piece of that is then, if they don't have a mentoring program or they're not running small facilitated groups, it doesn't have to be one-on-one. When we have groups of 4 or 5 kids, that's just as effective because they're still connecting with you and they're also making friends, which a lot of these kids have a hard time doing. And then finding out what they're doing and then maybe asking them to start programs like this and looking for funding. It's work. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm looking for dollars every other day, as Marianne clearly knows, as she does too. But it's out there, and I think there's partnerships out there as well that you can kind of leverage what each other is doing. There's different programs throughout different cities that do things a little differently, and I think getting some best practices together, and Boys Council and Girls Circle is a best practice. I'd love to say it's my brainy idea, but I steal every good idea out there and come up with, very rarely do I come up with them on my own. These are great programs that we decided after looking at the outcomes that it's something we should be doing. Anybody can replicate those and do those. And obviously I would be happy to share those resources, and I would be happy to come to any of your jurisdictions and talk to nonprofits and talk about how to get this kind of stuff up and running. But most of them know, I just don't know they know what's needed. And I think if you were to get together and have a guided discussion about what is it that we really need to do, and this is what you're thinking, that many of them would do it.
How many children do you service a year through SAFE?
We served 1,800 people a year in our PAL program. Last year we had 400.
We had 400.
They come in all sorts of different gates. Some of the kids come in through youth court. Other kids, it's just because they want their kids to hang out with policemen. Or we like to make clubs, so the kids, maybe a kid wants to ride horses, but of course it's expensive, and you could never have that happen. So our kids are, I always say, like a classroom. It's not, we have straight A students and we have kids on probation, and everybody brings each other up instead of learning the other behaviors.
And how did the kids or families find you? Are they referred through the police? Are they referred through school counselors? How is that done?
It's
Both.
through every therapist. We put stuff in the paper all the time. Like, we're going to have a Safe Summer series where you can come in and parents are going to learn about what their kids are doing online, which fits into what the task force is doing. We'll have a parent group. So we just put out flyers, just like all the other groups do, about fun things to do or parenting course. We have a lot of parenting classes called Parent Project. So parents will come in that door, and we pretty much pretend that we can mandate them to put their kids in the other program. Why they get parenting, because then we kind of help both of them. Because obviously Johnny's not cussing at mom and yelling at her. She'll relax a little, and they both will start doing better because the anxiety level's down. So working on both of them at the same time is helpful.
Do you have enough funding? Do you have to turn away families? Or
We don't
That's
have
a
enough
magic
funding.
question.
And 2, we never turn away families. We just work harder.
Thank you.
Well,
Barely see you.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to sit up taller, but I'm sitting here nodding, frantically nodding, because we serve about 600 kids a day at 4 locations, and we do exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes just engaging them in things that they show an interest in or a talent for, and then you have the adult mentor, that it's finding that key thing, and you have to find what's special about every child, and some children it's really a challenge. And I also agree with what you said about leadership. We have taken, you can watch kids on a playground or in an activity room, and you can spot the kids who are the trouble kids. I mean, it's obvious who they are. And we intentionally focus on those kids, not to the exclusion of others, but those are the ones that we assign adult role models to, and the kids don't even know that they're being assigned. They're given adult mentors. When we have our staff meetings, we actually talk about that. We know where every child is every day and what the issues are, and then we can bring in those resources to deal with those issues. So, and you talk about on school sites, because there's lack of funding. Prop 49 provides funding, and the district has a couple of a couple of organizations that do on school sites, but that's why the Boys and Girls Club has 16 buses. You know, they come in the morning and we take them to school and we bring them back from school. And sometimes it helps to get them out of that school setting. If they're having issues with school, I think sometimes it's easier to deal with them when they're away from school. So it's finding what's key, that every child that has issues, it's finding out what their talents are and giving them responsibility and holding them accountable as they exercise those talents. So you have to look for the victories, and you have to teach about the anytime they act up or anytime they push the boundaries, and the older they get, the more they're going to push. What you said about middle school kids is true too, and Christy will probably say, when I was on the school board, we had more expulsions and more issues with middle schoolers than we did high schoolers. I don't know if that's not the trend anymore, but a few years ago, 10 years ago, that we did have more middle school issues. Maybe not as serious issues, but I was stunned. It ain't your grandma's school anymore. It ain't your grandma's middle schoolers. So we have to consistently start working at younger and younger ages. And when you put them in an environment where they know that they can succeed and when they know they're safe, safety is a huge thing. When we survey our kids, that's what they say. What do you think about the Boys and Girls Club? I feel safe here. That is huge for some kids because of the reasons you said. So it's providing that type of environment for them where they do feel safe and they don't feel threatened. And you can see their body language change when mom or dad, sometimes when they're picked up. So we watch them very, very carefully. So, and we have never turned a child away like SAFE. So it's a challenge to find funding, and we do it every day, huh? And I know we have SAFE kids, and I know you've got kids that have come from Boys and Girls Clubs. So it's great to have you as a neighbor and a working partner. So remember, everybody in this room, if you're in Southwest Riverside County, you have that resource. You have SAFE, you have Boys and Girls Club, and we're always there.
Thanks, Melissa, for a great presentation. My comment will be short because my colleagues here have asked a number of great questions and made great comments. You mentioned services, and I think it was one of my colleagues down at the other end of the dais, I think it was you, Steve, mentioning, what can we do as cities? And not to make it sound elementary, but is there a list? If you were, let's say, to prepare a list for us on a city school district level that says, you know what, these are the things cities and school districts can be doing. You had mentioned some classes and different types of seminar that we can put on, or that we can engage people to put on. And I'm thinking, my gosh, how much can a class like that cost? If it to have a class of 30 or 40 people, what would it cost? $1,000? Well, we can maybe not even that, but
no.
And see, we can raise that type of money. Shoot, we can raise that type of money in the community. Mm-hmm. But I think what we might be lacking, and again, the purpose of this task force is we don't know. So maybe part of your homework, if you can, is make us a list. Cities, school districts, this is what you can do. And then we can start munching on it. And I know each and every one of us will take it back and go, wow, you know what? I'm going to commit to, 2 domestic violence classes. It's going to cost, $1,500. The first thing, we think about is, hey, let's see if our cities can provide it. But you know what? We don't have to do that. We can go out to the community, see if we can get those, funded by private individuals or things of that nature. So could you do that?
Absolutely, I could do that. A good example of that is CalWorks. We are going to go out and train. Obviously, my staff, there's a state mandated training for sexual assault and domestic violence on top of, obviously, your degree. But that qualifies you as an advocate. And we are actually going out and doing that training for county mental health in CalWorks. And it just made my ears like, oh my gosh, we're usually fighting like, no, don't say that. That's dangerous. We've had so many calls from them, and they've realized that they really need to have some basic understanding of what's happening with their clients when they come in. I'm not saying they're going to be the advocate and do the work, but they can at least do things that aren't dangerous. And that happens with employers and all sorts of folks. What do we do with that first entry level if you're seeing a kid or a family that has these problems? So that was good news. And I think we could do the same thing for teachers. There's some real basic stuff you can do, and obviously they don't need the 40-hour become an advocate training. And we're actually getting paid too. I'm so excited. I usually do everything for free. It's so nice actually. So we're excited because we're going to arm 40 people that see a lot of people in this county and help
But
them.
it would be great for Boys and Girls Club staff, Sunday school teachers, anybody that deals with kids.
And the thing that's good about that too, because we've all been around for so long, we can cater that and soak in other groups and other people to a teacher versus a mental health person and what their roles are and what kind of their restrictions are, because obviously teachers are under a whole different mandate. So those things are catered to what your job is, so that you can be helpful. Like, what's the first question I ask? I mean, it's hard.
If
What
I
do
can
you
jump
ask?
in, is this like what warning signs to look for and behaviors and that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, that'd be
happy to do
great.
that.
But if you came back with a list that says, you know what, cities, if they can, should have one or two or three of these type of programs. These type of programs are usually implemented by these type of nonprofits. And in other words, we may not know what we don't know.
I gotcha.
Okay, and we may all have an aha moment and go, well, gosh, we can do that. And then knowing, again, just my colleagues up here, you kind of tell us what we have to go get, and we're going to go work and go get it.
Oh, I've always wanted to boss you guys around. That's great.
I mean, I think most of us here are built that way. You show us a problem, and you say this is how we're going to have to tackle it, and we'll go out and like I said, I know lots of people in our various communities who would be happy to. You just ask them to sponsor a class. Many businesses, things of that nature.
I can do that.
Beautiful.
All right, thank you, Melissa. I've got a couple questions. You mentioned 1/3 of females are affected by the violence, and that's extraordinary statistic. I worked in group homes when I was in college as a crisis counselor, and mostly it was in Rancho Damacitas and Temecula, then Oak Grove and Murrieta. So one of the common denominators that I noticed with the children, mostly teens, was just as you stated, every single one of them. I can't remember one that didn't have violence as part of their background, and they've become high-risk children. I was interested in the empirical data that you mentioned about the return on investment when you reach the child at an early age. Has there been any wide-scale studies on that? I know you did a paper, but I'm looking for the ROI on the results if you reach the child at a younger age.
There is actually, I was part of a, governor it was, I think Davis, did a whole evaluation of the state of California and Child Protective Services, and they cost it out on changing the way CPS is seen as not coming to get your kids, but we're here to help your family. It was a whole across the state of experts, and there's a whole document on that, and I think they did that very thing. And obviously, whatever the difference of that, what that money means today, but it's a good outline, so I will look and see if I can get you that. Okay,
that'd be great, because you responded to two questions as that's the $100,000 question, and I disagree with you. I think it's the $1 million question, because to reach these kids, and I know you guys stretch the dollar mightily. You and your staff do an extraordinary job. Leads me to one of my other ideas is I think there may be some opportunity to pursue grants under a collaboration of multi-agencies. And when you get a group like this, if you say we're already formed, we've identified the need, and the return on investment is greater at an early age, I think there might be some doors. So I encourage you, if you see those grants come through, to approach this. You got cities and school districts here to get on-campus programs, and I know there's a lot of money out there if we can provide the quantitative data to get it. So if you see it, come to us. The last question or request I have is, I know you shared your knowledge and expertise extraordinarily today. I'd like you to expand on some of the specific programs, because I know you guys offer a lot of them. Can you give me some more details on the equestrian program, the facility you have next to the Boys and Girls Club, and what do you guys do there with the kids?
Yeah, we have so many, I have to remember them all. Well, the Equestrian Center is our newest one, and that is out at the Murrieta Equestrian Park here. We have 2 horses that we provide writing lessons. We have a teacher that brings out the kids, and some of the kids we pick for that program, we're either we can't engage in other stuff, or we just know they're not going to be interested. And we just finished our first session. Now we're starting our second, and it's been absolutely fabulous. So we knew it was going to be good before we started, but I didn't know how little, you know how you don't know what you don't know? Had I known, we wouldn't have horses right now. But it's been a great program. They're just a lot of work. We have basic needs assistance, so when a family comes through the door that's a domestic violence victim, and remember I always said she needs food, she needs da-da-da-da, we will give her all those things so that we can hope not have her run back home right now, give some breathing time. We have a shelter. We call it our Trinity Safe House. It's an unstaffed shelter. We're very picky about who goes in there. But it's a partnership with Trinity Lutheran Church, and we put families in there and wrap services around them and then transition them to a long-term place to live. We have emergency services. We manage family case management. We have victim awareness and anger management. And those are two, when Mike was asking me, Councilman Nagar, excuse me, was asking me to put programs together, those two programs, as boring as they sound, and they're court-mandated programs, we use our own curriculum, and they are to deal with the kids. These are low-level crimes and kids through youth court. We've seen tremendous change in those kids. And these are kids that probably had not, if they had not come in through youth court, they would be going down that path. Not all of them, some of them. And those are curriculum classes where they are really learning, I stole your purse, what did that do? So we're trying to flip it so they learn to have empathy for the other person and what that did to them, and we kind of walk them through the what happens when you do what type of crime, and they have to tell you when they come in the door, no matter what it is. There's no anonymity, there's no quiet. You are here to spill your guts, and if you want that piece of paper not to go to juvenile hall, you're gonna. And those kids, then what we do is hopefully pull them into our other programs so that they go fishing with Bill on his boat, so that they go horseback riding, so that they go mountain biking, so they go with Murray to PD this weekend to the Quakes game. So it's kind of, if you make it through this, look at all this cool stuff you're going to do down the road. We do restraining orders at the Family Justice Center and case management. We have employer domestic violence training. Remember I told you the training we're doing for CalWorks? We will do that and go into an employer business and train them on how to deal with having an employee, because there are laws on the books about what you can do and what you can't do with folks that come in and have domestic violence, but you want to keep all your employees safe, and how do you do that? We've seen, if you watch the news over the past year, you've seen some pretty serious folks getting, not only did the victim get shot, but other people did too, so we're trying to help them mitigate all that. And just one thing, don't ever leave your back door unlocked. That's like the main number one thing that they all do, and they always come in the back. So that's a real basic one for employers. And then our PAL program, we do all sorts of stuff. We just try to keep them busy, engage them, and get them to know people so they feel connected somewhere. We just graduated 8 seniors, party for them to go away to college, and some of the kids didn't, and that's okay. We still celebrated. They graduated high school, and so we just do a lot of, we feed them all the time. Food's an important thing. Food, all the time. Coming in the door is really the plan.
If you could finish the sentence. Parent decides to walk away from a violent situation, shows up on someone's doorstep, needs help. They would call.
Well, if it depends on what time it is, we're not open, we're not available 24/7 anymore with the loss of funding. We used to be. I would suggest you don't take them in on your own. I would also suggest if you can put them in a hotel for the night on your own dime, I'll reimburse you for it. Have them call SAFE the next morning at 587-3900, or the Family Justice Center at
Thank you very much. I have to comment. You don't know what you don't know, and that's the conversation Mayor Gibbs and I had after our last meeting. We, in our school district, do have not as many programs as we would like, but we are on our way. And 2 days ago, we came, a team from our district came to the city council meeting and presented on the programs and activities we have, the supports we have for students, not only academic support, but the affective support. And that's what we're talking about, the social emotional support that some of our students need. We have activities programs that are available to all students, and then as their need increases, we have more targeted supports available. And I think that was an eye-opening experience for our council, and I would certainly recommend all school districts partner up with your cities and share what programs and activities you have available, and then build from that. And we collaborate, yes, funding is tight. It is very hard to provide everything we want to do, but we do the most important things. We prioritize, and we collaborate quite heavily with our partners like SAFE. And I really would encourage you all to work together, and then this group as a whole to put all of that knowledge together. And I think that'll be very powerful for our region. So,
one thing I would suggest as well, Councilman Barr, when you were saying put something together, I think I can give you a laundry list of some basic stuff, and I think as you go back to your respective jurisdictions, then you can see what you have already and kind of plug the holes in, and so that there could be some prioritizing of what's not available, or what you think is more, maybe you have 5 things available, but it's not even really targeting what you feel the issues are based on really statistics and what we know is to be a serious problem. And you could maybe help some of those folks reallocate where that focus is, because we all tend to do what we know and what we like. And just because I have a program that I love doesn't mean it's necessarily effective or that anybody really wants to do it. It's because I'm pushing it. And we get kind of stuck in ruts that way, and funding kind of keeps coming that same way. And as times change and needs are different, not all of us are quick to move. I mean, I'm not. So I think being able to evaluate that with some outside folks to say, is that really going to hit the mark, and what are the outcomes? And if you can't answer what your outcomes are, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I see that a lot with, I'm guilty as when I talk about what we don't do, I'm including myself. If you don't know what it's doing and you can't really have a good articulation of what that is translating into in behavior change and outcomes, even if it's a simple outcome, there's less violence, reduced recidivism. That's huge. But what does that mean, and how did you get there? If you can't do that, then it's probably something that shouldn't be going anymore, or reevaluated and retooled so that it's actually dealing with what is presenting.
I'm going to jump in for just one quick second. The school district gave a presentation, as Mr. Mossian said, 2 nights ago. It was a very rushed and compressed hour because there was a lot that they had to present. Clearly, they could have presented for 5 or 6 hours and not gotten into the level of detail that we would have really appreciated seeing. Tomorrow, you will all, every task force member, will have a link to this video presentation. We made sure we had it. And I would encourage that the cities and the school districts look at the presentation here. If there's something that you see that strikes you as, that might work in our school district, I know our school district would be happy to talk to you and give you some more details. Similarly, as we go forward in time, I would hope that each of the cities and school districts would do the same and put that link on the website so that we can all have access to that, and this will be a collaborative effort. So I'm sorry about preempting you.
No problem. Thank you very much for the presentation. The task force in general is really an eye-awakener. We all, I can honestly say, I think we all think everything's in place, and then when we hear these presentations, it makes us really start thinking what is in place and what's not. The quick question I have, because I have a commitment to get to, so the PAL program, I'm familiar with it. How are you guys running it? In other words, are you reaching out to the kids at the school sites? Are they coming to the police station? Where are they meeting?
We're going to meet all over the place. Obviously, we have activities that are on site at our facility, but we're out at the Murrieta Equestrian Center. We go out to Murrieta PD, and we have movie night out there. We do.
So how many police officers, how many law enforcement officers are involved in PAL?
It kind of goes up and down as guys promote, retire, move around. So at our bestest, we probably had about 30. We're a little low.
30 officers involved in PAL?
Different times we had a mentoring program and leadership. They come and participate. So it just depends on what they want to do and what They all sign up to go fishing.
So how many children would you say then are you seeing every day?
We don't see them every day. It's
Oh.
activity-based. There might be groups. Some kids might be in 4 groups and go on every weekend trip. Some kids might just come once a week. Some kids are just in leadership. It just depends on what they need, number one. Number two, what is available for them. So it's very individualized. They have to join a club when they start. We've changed how we do it. It used to be you just sign up and do recreation, fun stuff. Now we make them sign up for a club. They have to have a interest. And if they're not interested in anything, we'll help them find something.
And your Pell is limited to elementary age level children, right?
No, 5 to 18.
5 to 18? Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Ruiz?
Thank you. What a great opportunity this is to hear the ideas that you have, and this is what I think a lot of us are in politics for, in this business, is to go out and help our citizens, especially the ones who don't always get the help. So anything that we can do to help you, you know, shoot us an email, any one of us, I'm sure, will be right there. I'd like the same information that they're talking about, because the more information we have, the better armed we are, and the more support we can be for families in need. Those families that come out of situations like that, it's awful. It's awful. If you've ever witnessed it, I have seen something like that once, and I don't ever want to see it again because I wasn't raised that way. You know, 911, hello. But not everybody is lucky enough to be able to do that. So it's good to see something where these kids can get out and learn a better life, and what a great opportunity you have. And thank you for being here and working with us to make our cities better.
Sorry, we're making you turn around. Okay, now I'm going to take a little different tack because I've read through, and I'm sorry I came late, but such is our life, right? I'm a mother of a Down syndrome boy. And so how do he's nonverbal. I have 6 kids, but having him is like having 15 at once. How do you recognize the battery? It is a high stress level to have any special needs within your home. How do you recognize with those nonverbal kids? You know, my son, you know, they do stuff, they're clumsy, they end up hurting themselves quite often, or they're in a combative school situation because they've got kids in there. And I'm looking through, how do you reach those kids, and how do you find this? Because it may not necessarily have come from a stressful or a domestic violence background. It's just all of a sudden a parent or parents are faced with a really stressful situation that they didn't anticipate. Because I know I've had kids over to play with my son, and some of the things that the kids say to me, I'm like, ooh, what's going on at your home? How do you recognize that, and how do you differentiate? Sometimes they say inappropriate things anyway. It's kind of part of their character. Is there anything in place? Are there what kind of things are for us parents of special needs kids can we be on the lookout for to recognize those problems within maybe perhaps other homes?
Well,
I know it's a complicated question. Sorry.
Okay. And I think we can probably chat after. And actually, I started working in social
Okay.
So I worked at ARC, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And caregivers are the highest levels.
Excuse me, Melissa, could you just pick a microphone, any microphone to speak into, so we have your voice on camera?
I want to turn my back to you. I think it's no different than a professional about what kind of behaviors is not a normal behavior of a kid that's just in developmental phase, saying something inappropriate. It's a challenge because we're talking about a whole educational piece. I would suggest that if you think something's wrong, it probably is. Yeah, I mean, most time people will say, well, I thought something was going on, but I didn't want to call, If you think something's wrong, then you just need to make that call. Or you can call us and say, here's what I heard, here's what I'm seeing, what do you think? We'd be happy to take your phone call and kind of walk you through that. But it's so hard to answer that question without seeing and hearing exactly what you're talking about. So it's tough. So I would just pick up the phone and call and run that by somebody. And like I said, if you feel like something's probably not right, it probably isn't.
Okay, a couple comments. Long time ago, a real long time ago, I worked on a ranch when I was 19, and this ranch was a functioning ranch, but it also doubled as a home for kids from Minneapolis and Chicago who were bad kids. And we had an 8-year-old on the ranch who was really an interesting kid to look at because he was part black, part Mexican. So he had curly hair that was blonde, dark skin, and blue eyes. And I always wondered what happened to him, because when you engage in high-risk behaviors, it makes you kind of suspicious. The first high-risk behavior I noticed about him was that he would always try and get his horse as close to the rattlesnake as possible and then try and jump on the head of the rattlesnake, boots first. Sometimes he missed, but he was lucky that he didn't get struck. When, towards the end of the summer, you were stocking up on the ranch for the winter, and you would butcher chickens by the hundreds. And this is the kid who wanted to butcher the most chickens, to kill the most chickens. And, you know, you really didn't know everything about the kids. You weren't supposed to, but I did ask. And so Ralph, and remember, this is 50 years ago, so this is a time when the justice system really didn't know how to handle really young kids. Ralph's mom was either a lady with an awful lot of boyfriends or she was a prostitute. Not exactly sure which. But she had been beaten up multiple times and she called for help. And Ralph, at 8 years of age, killed. So the justice system just was like, what do we do? But, you know, I look at that and I think that Ralph was the perfect setup for, as you put it before, affected. And he clearly was. You also said something about family guilt. So I was living in Palmdale. We had lots of gang problems up in Palmdale and Lancaster, not like living in this area. And so I'm the foreman of a jury. And it was domestic violence. Guy beats up his wife and now he's on trial. The system is pretty incredible because the wife says it never happened. The son says, I made a mistake. I should have never called. It never happened. And this is where you get to PD and you say to the police officer, do you remember this family? No, sir, I don't. How can you not remember this family? And the answer is, I had 300 of these events last year. So, you know, the magnitude of the problem is so astronomical that that police officer literally, one family just kind of blends into another. So what I will say about SAFE is that a friend of mine calls me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and says, and PD just handcuffed my husband and he beat me up. What do I do? And I said, here's the telephone number. And at the other end is Melissa Donaldson. And in a few hours, she'll be at work. Call her. She did. Melissa talked about all the things that she can do for families. She did all that for this particular family. And it took a while for the divorce to go through. But when it went through, this lady got custody of her 2 teenage daughters who clearly were affected by what had happened within her family. So there were multiple sources that you can go to for help. But if you're really in the middle of the night, you just don't know what to do, as Melissa said, call 911. Nobody really wants to take away your children. They want to work with you. But when you're in a crisis and you don't have a choice, 911's the best place to go. But if it happens in the afternoon, call Melissa because she'll be available to help you out. Okay, at this time, we finished up, fortunately, a little bit early, so we have time for public comments. So if anybody in the audience would like to take the microphone, we would welcome hearing what you have to say, whether it's a question, whether it's a remark, comment, please feel free. Sure. Come on up. I think this microphone, Alex, does this microphone over here work? Or, well, it's okay. Yeah. Okay.
Riverside for the Department of Mental Health, and I'm a senior parent partner with Mid-County. And I brought some packets with me, and we do a lot of different things like classes for parents who have children involved in mental health, or maybe they have some extreme behavioral challenges. We do parenting classes, different things like that. I brought some of my packets. I probably don't have enough for everyone. I have them in English and I have them in Spanish, and everything we do is free of charge. We do things like support parents in many different ways. It just depends on what the family needs are. But our job is very different, so we just mold ourselves according to parents' needs. So I brought some of my resource packets, but like I said, I probably don't have enough for everyone.
Thank you ever so much. You know, the more information we can garner, the better off we'll be. Sir.
Hi, I'm Denny Mile, President and CEO of Temecula Valley People Helping People. I've been out here about 30 years. I know a lot about SAFE. I was in the beginning stages of it. Melissa, first of all, you and your department has probably saved a lot of lives. I know what you do and how you do it. We save one life, one child, one woman, anybody that's it's working, and the system does work. Unfortunately, as you stated, there's a lot of crime out there, a lot of stuff going on. The economy has caused a lot of the problems out there. I know the last 2 years, last year we did 23,000 children, senior families, and vets for Christmas. The year before that was 30,000. So it's telling you what's going on in the area. There are a lot of resources. We partner with 60 different resources. Our website is like 211. There are a lot of resources on there. DPSS, everybody works on them, uses them. There's a lot of information out there that you can use. You can go to our website and do it. And you can also, like Melissa, we all work together. It takes a village to raise a child. And that's exactly what it's all about for all of us. As a group, I've been in a lot of areas, and I remember back in 1992 with the Davises that came out here for the tragedy we had in front of the high school. Their last comment to me was, if we didn't live in the place we lived, this is where we would like to live. You guys got a great area, because we all love and do care about what's going on in the community, what it's really all about. But it will take us all to make it happen.
Thank you. Welcome.
My name is Antoinette Antone, and I left a situation that was domestic violence. But it seems there's a trend in my life that I keep finding the same kind of gentleman. So how do you stay safe? Do you have a program where I can stay safe?
Welcome.
Hi. Rebecca Weersing. I work with family engagement with the school district and PTA. And I think that some of the things that have come out about being able to learn how to work among different groups with a facilitator is very important, because we are like a silo. You know, there are a lot of resources. The interagency council meets regularly. We know about all of these things. How do we bring them together to be able to make a difference? And I think that cross-communication of really sitting down and doing the hard work of coming up with a plan between the different agencies is really critical to making a difference.
Thank you, Rebecca. Seeing nobody else in the, well, Mr. Lambert, are you? Welcome, Mr. Lambert.
I find it interesting that there are these places where people can find help that's a little different than just calling the police or Child Protective Services. And I plan to look into it a little bit more. There's some things in my neighborhood that are pretty bad, and you wonder if a child should be taken out of the home or not. And then it's like 7th grade girls living in a home where several of the people are kind of mentally disabled or something, and they have lots of, like the one mother just has sounds like a 25-word vocabulary, of which the F word is in every sentence unless she's mad, and then it's in every sentence twice. And then there's a man that has a very low threshold for kind of going berserk, using that as a slang word. So I see this 14-year-old girl and her grandmother that's, I think, normal, and they're out in the yard, and there's 3 policemen there, and then there's 4 policemen there, and then there's 6 policemen there, and then the man goes into a rampage and plows down 3 of them. And there's always things going on, and the poor girl, I don't think, could have any friends over. And so it looks like there's some activities that might be helpful. And so I appreciate the whole idea of trying to spread the word about where people can get help.
Thank you, Mr. Lambert. Melissa, that one almost sounded like a cry for intervention. Is there anything that you could suggest to the audience if they notice a situation like that?
Sound like a broken record, but anytime that you are worried about, so I mean, I know a lot of people are scared to call 911. 911 sounds like people have, but I see 911 as a benefit. I mean, but we have to teach people it's okay to call them. That's their jobs, and if it doesn't require law enforcement intervention, law enforcement has community resources that they are going to give those people when they call and when they come visit them. So it's not a bad thing to call. That's what they're there for. And obviously CPS is the same way. Underage kid that's in a bad situation, you just make the call. And it's just hard, but people need to do it.
To the lady over here who took the microphone, thank you for being so candid with us. Let me probably echo something that Melissa was getting to earlier in the conversation. Domestic violence can happen to anybody. My sister-in-law at one time was the most highly decorated woman in the FBI. And while she had a broken leg, her husband got drunk and tried to throw her down a staircase. And I talked to her the next day, and I said, you need to get out of the house. There are 2 possible outcomes if you don't get out of the house. He will kill you, or you will bring out your service revolver and kill him. In either case, a very bad situation. A week later, she became the true victim of domestic violence and said, well, maybe it was my fault. And I said, you're a trained hostage negotiator. Listen to what you're saying. This is not your fault. So eventually she saw the light, did get divorced. So at this time, I'm going to start to my left with Ms. Tomasian, and this will be for closing comments.
I have nothing further. It was a very enlightening discussion. I look forward to more. Thank you.
Just a thank you to Melissa and your staff for filling an extraordinary need. Unfortunately, it's needed, but we're glad that you're there to fill that need. And thank you to Mayor Nagar and Mayor Gibbs for putting this on, because as the speaker stated before, I think we have a lot of extraordinary talent, but the interoperable communication is what's really of value for this task force. So thank you.
No closing comments. I think enough was said. Before we leave, we need to determine the venue for the next meeting. And when is the next meeting, Betsy? Do we know? July 8th. And what's the topic? Cyber safety. Okay, so that'll be a good one, but that's what we need to do, whether it's here again or in Temecula, or if somebody else wanted to host it.
I have one question. So our takeaway today, are we to compile lists within our own agencies of resources? Is that what we're doing? I know you're going to provide a list to us, but do we have any homework in return?
I think it would be appropriate that each city, just like Murrieta did 2 days ago by working with your school district, to make available what the school district already has in effect. So we don't reinvent the wheel. And also, if there's anything that your police departments are doing, and they're probably going to say we're working with Melissa, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, if there's anything else that they're doing, we'd probably like to see that on the list.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. I know you work with the Interagency Council with the school district, and I'm sure staff will be very happy to make sure that the city is aware of what programs are offered through our schools. Thanks.
Again, thank you, Melissa. I think the points you've made, that the effects of domestic violence is definitely long-lasting and needs to be intervened immediately. I had the honor, I guess, but the opportunity to work in a safe house about over 30 years ago in Riverside, and it stuck with me. I was one of the first male people allowed, I guess. I didn't know that at the time, but we would be there and have conversations with the women and so forth after kids were in bed and so forth. And what stuck with me is the comment that one lady just would say, "Is it okay if my husband hits me because of this or because of this?" And I kept saying, "It's not okay at all." You know, I mean, but that was so ingrained that just is generation after generation, and that needs to be intervened immediately. So whatever, thank you for what you do.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
I'd just like to make a personal statement. I have a daughter, I have an ex-son-in-law who just got out of jail a month ago for beating up my daughter. He was in jail for 5 years. So I've got some personal experience on this. And one thing I'd like to say is 6 years ago, when I was talking to my daughter trying to avoid the situation that landed him in jail, I tried to seek out some intervention and was unsuccessful in doing that. It's naive to think that people in that condition, in that situation, are going to call 911, especially when there's, in their minds, minor incidents. Even though in reality, I look at the situation and I know we're heading to disaster, which happened. And so I think there needs to be efforts made to make sure that there's intervention opportunities other than calling the police. And I think that that should be a goal of legislation in cities, to make sure that those intervention opportunities are known to people. 911 simply wasn't the solution in our case, and I don't think it's the solution for a lot of women who are in an abusive relationship that's bound to escalate. So I just wanted to throw that comment out there.
Can I respond to that real quick? I don't think 911 is a solution to domestic violence at all. It is a way to keep someone safe in the middle of an emergency. The solution is much broader and longer outside of law enforcement. Law enforcement is responsive to a danger. That's definitely not the solution. And obviously that's going to be a safety issue. But for what you're talking about, the educational piece, learning what domestic violence is and the psychology behind it and getting out of it is a whole different ballgame, and that is definitely what nonprofits do.
My impression is we needed somebody to call, or I needed somebody to call to say, I have a daughter who's in an abusive relationship. Now is the time when intervention will work. I didn't have that phone number to call, and as a result, she was nearly killed as a result of domestic violence. Somehow or another, we need that phone number that's pre-911 emergency of someone to contact.
Thank you. Ladies?
I would like to thank you for everything that you do and the fact that you relieve so much of a burden off the cities. You know, with the rising crime, our police officers and our firemen can't be expected to do it all. So what you do as a nonprofit is amazing, and thank you so much.
I want to thank the task force for bringing this forward. This is an important issue that needs to be talked about. It needs to be brought from the darkness to the light. We need to take this seriously. We need to get people hope and help. It's our job as representatives for this community to get out there and fight for them. And this is one of the fights that's worth fighting for. So thank you for doing the fight. You got us on board. We're going to help you in any way we can. So thank you.
Okay, a couple of comments. The link is up for the City of Murrieta for the school district's presentation. It's www.murrieta.org/City Hall, one word City Hall, /clerk, CLERK, /videos, VIDEOS, .ASP. And we will send that link out to every one of the task force members. This evening's presentation by Melissa will be on channel 33. Yeah, channel 33 if you have Verizon, this Sunday and the following Thursday at 6 p.m. And we will, of course, make that video available to the task force as well. A couple of closing comments. Sort of this chicken and egg thing. So are we here to make connections or stimulate discussion? And the answer is both. And clearly what you heard tonight was an awful lot of discussions and great ideas coming up. And as this gentleman said, 911 really isn't the answer for everything. And maybe that's one of the things that we collectively can be thinking about, intervention opportunities. And Mr. Lambert, when he took the microphone, he was talking about something that really needs intervention, and what do we do? So as we go forward, we need to remember that the collaboration between this group really can have an important effect on other people's lives. For going forward in the future, everybody in this panel, think about who you would like to see as a guest speaker. In our communities, there is a Melissa in every one of our communities, and we need to take advantage of that Melissa or that John, whoever it happens to be. And lastly, let me just say that Melissa, all of us owe you a vote of thanks, and there's one thing I haven't heard, so I would like to just start it. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned. Thank you for attending.